welcome to this Radcast. I am here with my uh, my key collaborator, Elizabeth West, and we're excited to come at you today with a lot of new ideas. Elizabeth, how you doing there in California?
I'm well, thank you. It's felt like the Pacific Northwest here for the last couple of days. Rainy, cold. I think it was snowing in the mountains. So climate change continues to keep us on our toes. But anyway, I'm fine. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for asking.
Good.
Here in Seattle. Yeah,
Yeah.
it also feels like the Pacific Northwest up here, so I'm right there with you. But
Well,
we've
that
had
would be appropriate for you. Yeah.
Yeah, but we've had some really beautiful days. In fact, took my mom swimming in Lake Washington earlier this week. Just absolutely loved it. It was so warm. Um, all righty.
Well,
Well,
welcome.
yeah. Hmm.
So, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. But I
Okay.
thought maybe we'd start with sort of a synthesis slash recap slash summary of kind of where each of us is coming from individually and also where we're coming from collectively, because what we're putting together with this series is, it's a form of collective intelligence. Um, and so I'll just start with where I'm coming from. Where I'm coming from is having spent a very good amount of time, a greater part of a couple of weeks with uh, Professor Guy McPherson um, and his partner Pauline. I have really become steeped in the perspective of Professor McPherson, and the bottom line of that is I have really embraced this idea that we are in the midst of a period of abrupt climate change, and which is leading us on the path to near-term human extinction in the order of the next several years. How many years? It's impossible to say at this point, but it could be a very small number counted on one hand, and or it could be counted on two hands. But I emphasize that I've embraced this perspective because there is so much data, so much information, so many feedback loops, positive feedback loops and negative feedback loops, that you'd have to be a genius to understand it all. So there's a certain degree of faith in my embracing this perspective, and I just want to be open about that. And then secondarily, where am I standing and where am I coming from in the face of this realization and this perspective that I'm embracing? And where I'm coming from is that this represents an existential crisis, not just for humanity, but for all species and the entire planet. And we need to treat it as an emergency, start talking about it as such. And I know there's lots of aspects to it, lots of emotional, psychological, spiritual, community, family, grieving, letting go, etc. aspects. And I'm really good with all those. I'm good with embracing those and spending time exploring those. And I just to be clear where I'm coming from, just to kind of juxtapose that whole world of, this, for lack of a better word, the softer side of life. And I just look at this like a fireman, and am just looking at the urgency of what can we do. Now, the what can we do, paradoxically, doesn't just span engineering, logistics, etc. It also involves very intimately and intricately transformation in human culture, transformation in our living arrangements, right? Transformation of the very story of humanity. Who are we and why are we here? Right. I think that urgently needs to transform toward a story of we're here to protect and heal planet Earth and each other. So I do believe very much in the soft stuff, and I guess where I'm really coming from is a place of urgency. Let's roll up our sleeves and let's get this done. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit, because I've had a whole bunch of ideas in the last few days that I'm excited to share with you, Elizabeth, and share with our audience. But anyway, first, that's just kind of my opening salvo. So I'm going to go on mute and pass it to you, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Jamin. That was a a good opening. And I would just add to it that I share your understanding of what's happening, um, and embrace it as well. I don't believe we have that much time left on this planet as things stand, ourselves as human beings, and unfortunately, many other species that um, also depend on, the same kinds of things that we do to survive here. Um, my interest in general is to look at how we can prepare for the imminent demise of ourselves as individuals, those we love, and the planet. And that preparation can take a number of forms and spreads into different realms, both some of those which you noted, the spiritual, the psychological, the emotional, as well as more practical means of preparation. Um, I am also thinking lately, Jamin, about the fact that there are a growing number of us who actually do embrace this idea, who accept the likelihood. And I appreciate your noting that some of it has to do with faith because it is complicated scientifically. But there are an increasing number of us who are able to take this in and who have read enough and listened enough and thought enough, observed enough, um, to find ourselves in a similar place in terms of what we are facing, evaluating what we're facing. However, I think we talked a little bit in our last episode about, or last hangout, whatever. We talked about how uh, uh, it's inherent in human nature that we have different mechanisms for coping with difficulty, with stress, with challenge, with danger, and and I think that leads to many of us. I mean, that's one piece of it. Obviously, there's a lot that makes up a human, and their mind and their soul and their heart, but we have different reactions and responses to this impending disaster. And I'm growing more and more fascinated with how we can bridge some of those differences. I see that, so often many of us with a lot of shared values end up on opposite sides of a wall, because because of that actual difference in the way that we understand the situation and we understand how to cope with it. So that's something that's very interesting to me at this point, is how can we see into each other's hearts and souls and make room for a variety of responses in the face of this huge collective challenge.
Wow, I love the way you put all that together, Elizabeth. Thank you. And I love this dialectic, and I love the collective intelligence that this represents. Now, this is just the collective intelligence, just the collective intelligence of two of us, and I think we're demonstrating, just how powerful that can be. And then, as more and more people join, obviously, there's probably a sweet spot in somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 7 people or something like that, depending on the topic, depending on a lot of factors. But anyway, that I intentionally mentioned collective intelligence because from where I'm coming from, that's a really crucial part of of what I'm just going to call the solution, right? Or the set of solutions, or more specifically, the set of solutions and platforms, including transformation in human culture, including radical transformations in our living arrangements as humans on planet Earth, how we walk the Earth, how we impact the Earth, including transformation in the very story of what it means to be human. Um, I'm my my conviction is that we need a much higher form of intelligence than what we've currently been exhibiting or lately been exhibiting, as humanity in order to grapple with these problems. And I have a vision of sorts for how we can do that. And I'm going to sort of summarize it very briefly, just a super quick kind of overview, because it's covered elsewhere on radish.org, on ichiban.org, iccIBAN.org. And then I want to get into kind of the new stuff, right? But even before I get into that, let me just mention, by the way, I haven't shaved and my hair is kind of messy, and I just wanted to mention that I've got a lot of stuff on my plate, and taking care of my parents is the most important one, and we're doing whatever I can to address this emergency, this climate emergency is right up there. And so, some things just kind of fall by the wayside. I just wanted to acknowledge that, just, for my own comfort, and also just to hopefully help create a space where other people feel just as comfortable to come as they are.
Well, right. This isn't a performance. This is a dialogue, and it isn't. I hope that that your unshaven jaw will invite people to come as they are and to share where they are, because as I think we both understand, the evolution of our own experience here and our own perspective is ongoing and is influenced by other people, and we want to kind of add to that pot. So please come as you are.
Awesome. Thank you, Elizabeth. So let me start by giving kind of a visual overview of what I mean by collective intelligence. And actually, this will be sort of baptism by fire into the world of collective intelligence, because I'm going to start by talking about radical collective intelligence, which is sort of an extreme form of collective intelligence. And it starts with the question, what does it mean for our world to be whole? What is a whole world? What does our world need to be whole? And I break it down into wholeness for people and wholeness for the planet. And wholeness for people spans physical needs, higher needs, and then wholeness for the planet is the air whole, the water whole, the land whole, and air spans both, the urban air above Mexico City as well as the planetary atmosphere. And we can break these down and keep breaking these down and getting more and more specific about each specific need. And I just provide some, just some examples here. And that's an example of a taxonomy. This is a teleological taxonomy where the telos is a whole world. We use taxonomies in other ways, looking at global problems, which problems impact which other problems. And we analyze solutions holistically, such as, for example, carbon sequestration, regenerative agriculture, which sequesters carbon at a planetary scale and can have a major impact, transforming lifestyles, modes of transportation, forms of energy production. We look at solutions holistically. We look at, I just make an analogy here of a bill of materials explosion to root down to the very fine elements of any given solution or platform. And just to kind of provide a visual for radical collective intelligence and our vision of where this can take us, is imagine that this blue box here in the lower right represents the platform for radical collective intelligence. And imagine that this brain image here represents the actual collective intelligence, which grows on top of that platform. Well, that actual collective intelligence, much more powerful than the intelligence of a single person, that comes out pretty quickly, will be used for a number of things, including but not limited to building the next generation platform of radical collective intelligence, which will be much bigger, more sophisticated, more powerful, and therefore support more participation by more people across more topics, and ultimately a bigger collective intelligence will form and grow on top of that, which in turn can be used for, among other things, designing and building the next generation platform of radical collective intelligence, which will support an even bigger collective intelligence, and so on and so on and so on. And so what we have is now an exponentially growing form of collective intelligence, which we can use to come up with the near miraculous or actually miraculous solutions that we'll need in order to have a contender and turn this exponential abrupt climate change, which is leading to our near certain demise in the very near term. Let's turn it into a fair game of chicken where the contender is collective intelligence, or as I'm proposing, radical collective intelligence. Okay, so with that as an introduction, let me go back to video and prepare for, that was just sort of a kind of a hyperactive, very condensed, super summary of kind of where I'm coming from the standpoint of collective intelligence, really more of a flavor of it. But the fundamental hypothesis is that we can actually orchestrate and organize and create the conditions for the growth of this radical collective intelligence, which will grow exponentially and be so brilliant and so all-encompassing and so holistic that it, consisting of tens of millions to hundreds of millions to billions of human members participating in it, can be such a powerful form of intelligence that can focus like a laser and boop, 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 iterate through all the steps and all the pieces of all the solutions and platforms that need to be created to do as much as we possibly can as humanity to holistically solve our most daunting problems, most notably right now, abrupt climate change. And because it threatens human extinction and the extinction of most species. So what I'd like to do then is go from that fundamental hypothesis, go a bit deeper into a specific area of collective intelligence that I think will really help us to get to some of the answers that we need to get to as quickly as possible. We're kind of, as a species, the way I see it, we're kind of bumbling around like Tweedledee and Tweedledum. And we're, we still haven't figured out at the level of our species, we still have not figured out that this is a major crisis, an absolutely urgent crisis. It is mind-boggling that humanity as a whole has not woken up in the face of overwhelming evidence that that is indeed the case. So I'm going to do screen share in a moment. I just realized I first need to connect my iPad to my computer, to my MacBook. So let me do that. Okay. And then I'll show some of these new images. Okay.
While you're working on that, Jamen, I think I will take this opportunity to respond to what you just said, which was that as a species, we have not grasped what's going on right in front of us, all around us. And that, for me, raises questions having to do with words like solution and survival. And well, I am not at all unsympathetic to the desire to wake up the world. I'm not sure that we're not a little too late and that we need to focus on how it is that we each individually prepare for what's down the road a short ways or a little bit longer than a short ways. But I also applaud your endless font of enthusiasm for waking up the world and offering potential solutions. So are you ready to show us some?
I am ready.
Okay, cool.
Awesome. And then thank you for jumping in, Elizabeth. Please continue to jump in. I really appreciate it. Okay, so we're going to look at the iPad screen here. And by the way, if you want me to draw anything, Elizabeth, as you look at the screen, just say, "Hey, Jamen, would you please draw this or draw that?" I'll be delighted to. But here's where I want to start. Okay, I'm starting with something that I call the guy bifurcation. What do I mean by that? The guy bifurcation, basically, someone who is willing to listen to Professor Guy McPherson, watch one or more of his presentations, and really listen to his message, they walk away with one of two conclusions. Either Guy is right or Guy is wrong. Now, obviously, I'm going to see if I can just kind of draw it in here. There are many shades of gray in between Guy is right and Guy is wrong, right? So I'm speaking admittedly simplistically here, but I'm using simplicity as a tool to say, look, if Guy is right, that perspective, it begets a whole world. Suddenly your world transforms. You're living in a completely different world than the world you were living in before. And if you believe, on the other hand, that Guy is wrong, that begets a whole different world that you live in. You live in a world where we've got, decades to centuries to figure this out. There really is no crisis. That's all really overblown. There is no scientific consensus. I was having a conversation last night with someone who I actually consider to be brilliant. Incredibly bright guy, PhD, he's a professor, an old friend. We were in undergrad together. And he was going on and on and on and on about how, there is no scientific consensus. And we really can't predict. And there could be all kinds of, yes, there's positive feedback loops, but there's negative feedback. Blah, blah, blah. And he was just going on and on and on and on and on. So he lives in a whole different world than I live in. Now, why is that important? That's important because just as you have questions such as that, so let's go with that a little bit, shall we? So, and I'm going to trust you to jump in, Elizabeth, whenever you feel like it. Okay?
I will. Okay.
Oh, excuse me. And we're back. Okay, great. You see the yellow stuff, right? Okay. I'm going to create a new screen, a new drawing that says, okay, let's say that we've gotten past that bifurcation and we took the right fork, and I mean that.
Got it. Yep.
In both its meanings, yeah. And so we're basically coming from the place that says, okay, Guy is right, right? All right. Well, if Guy is right, where do we go from there? I propose, another bifurcation that basically says, I'm just going to put this in kind of comical terms. Jamen is right, versus Jamen is wrong, right? And I'm volunteering myself up as a cartoon character, basically representing, with Elmer Fudd-like intelligence and determination. Whereas he was out to kill the rabbit, Jamen is out to say, hey, we can do something to save something of life on planet Earth. And that may not necessarily include our own life, right, as a species, our own lives as a species. But there is something we can do to make things, if not better, at least less bad, less horrific, right? So basically, Jamen here symbolizes there is something to be done. Right.
And yes, exactly. I want to just point to that word right now.
Yeah.
Done, doing. Okay. So I think that's a really important piece of this exploration. So I'm just going to put a Post-it note on it. Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely.
All right. Go ahead.
I'll just put a yellow Post-it right here. Done and doing. So that's a Post-it. Okay. So we can come back to it. So, that creates yet another bifurcation. And then for those who say, okay, fine, there is something to be done, let's talk about what there is to be done, right? The what, maybe, more spiritual and, whatever. And others, another other group may say that the what is, more in the realm of, logistics and geoshading and, let's, you know what I mean? Again, it's a very false dichotomy, because the reality is lots of shades of gray between. I didn't intend for that to be shades of black. I actually meant shades of gray between, between the two. I'm actually just throwing that out as a really crude example of the kind of bifurcations that we can have,
Exactly.
even amongst those who say there's something to be done. Likewise, amongst those who say that Jamen is wrong and there's really nothing to be done to improve the planet or to preserve life or help regenerate life or whatever, they say, okay, Jamen is wrong. Well, for folks in that camp, all due respect to them, then the fundamental question is, okay, well, if Jamen is wrong, well, then what? What the hell do we do if not something to try to save the planet? And then, there are those who might, go in the narcissistic direction and basically just say, hey, let's just enjoy life and have lots of sex and take lots of drugs, whatever. And others who may take on, let's just call it a very serious, spiritual / communal path of growth, right? Or deconstruction or whatever, right? And I'm just throwing stuff out there, not because I've thought through any of this. Obviously, I'm just kind of whiteboarding here the kinds of fundamental questions. And there's now why? So why am I doing all these bifurcations and talking about this versus that? Here's why. Let me kind of cut to the chase. You can imagine all of these bifurcations. Imagine that that humanity is basically a whole bunch of people inside of this big three-dimensional cube, okay? And I'm just representing people as these little black dots. All right. Now, here I'm dividing the cube into 3 different bifurcations. Let me look at them one at a time. The first one is this blue thing, right? Do you see how there's this blue plane? And then to the left of these blue lines, everything is blue. Everything is blue. You're in this blue world. Okay, that could be for example. Let's just call that for example. Let's just say that's the Guy McPherson bifurcation. That if you're on the blue side, that means that A is right, right? And if you're on the non-blue side, I guess I'll just kind of make it as red here. I'll just say Guy is wrong, okay? But it's not really red, it's just not blue, right? And anyway, I just want to make that clear. Okay, so likewise, consider that there are 2 other bifurcations depicted in this picture here. One of them is the green bifurcation. So the green is basically everything on the top half of the cube is green, right? And so I just kind of put these light shades here to indicate that, right?
Got it.
So if you look at it, I'm just going to highlight something just to make it clear, and then I'll erase it. So I'm going to highlight in red, and then I'll erase the highlighting. So between the blue, which covers all this stuff, right, and to the left, right, okay, that's the blue, and then the green covers all this stuff and above, this line and above. What that means is, of the entire cube, these 2, you see how the entire cube is kind of divvied up into 8 little smaller cubes by these 3 planes?
I'm following you.
Okay, great. So these 2 small red cubes then are both green and blue. They're both green and blue. That's my point. And the rest of the cube, the upper 4 small cubes are green. 2 of them are blue, are also blue, but all 4 of the upper cubes are green. And likewise, all 4 of the left cubes being all of these 4, all 4 of the left cubes are blue. The top 2 are green, the bottom 2 aren't. And as promised, I'm going to erase all that red stuff and then finally introduce the pink, which is basically the, you know, going towards the front, right? From this imaginary line going towards the front. So the front 4 cubes, 1, 2, 3, 4. The front 4 little cubes are pink, the others are not. Okay, what's the point of all this? So these all represent fundamental bifurcations, like guy is right versus guy is wrong. This is useful because what people can then do is look at each of the bifurcations, decide which side they're on of the two. And by the way, there is also a middle, but we'll talk about that in a moment. For right now, just think of it in very simplistic black and white terms. Figure out which side of the bifurcation you're on. Let's say you're on guy is wrong. Okay, great. And then that settles it for the blue bifurcation. So you know you're in one of the rightmost 4 cubes, right? Whoops. You're in one of these. Okay, great. Now look at the next bifurcation. Well, if you think guy is wrong, then then what? And then let's just say that is the green bifurcation. And let's just say that you end up on the upper side of the green bifurcation, which means that you're up here. So you're in one of that limits you now to one of the top right 2 little cubes. And then the final bifurcation is the pink bifurcation. Which one are you in? And let's say that you finally net out that you're pink as opposed to not pink. That means you're in this quadrant. So now you have subdivided yourself into one of 8 subsets, 8 relatively specific subsets, because you've gone down the path of saying, is Guy, I'm going to look at Guy McPherson, is he right, is he wrong? And you're going to look at these other bifurcating questions. And so it sort of begins to look like, it's sort of like a decision tree that you walk down. You start here, you start from nothing. I don't know anything. I haven't taken any position on anything. You come first to the Guy McPherson bifurcation and you go this way. Then you come to the next question and you go this way. Next question, this way, then this way, then that way, then this way, then that way. You see what I'm saying? So, and over time, and in the big cube example, I showed only 3 bifurcations, but really, there can be any number. There's no limit to it. And so what's interesting about this is if you think about it sort of like a root structure or a fractal, pick your favorite geometric metaphor that includes branching like this. And what we see start to emerge is a situation where you get ever more specific. Let's just say these are leaf nodes, that when you've gotten out to the point where you can't make any more decisions, you've made every possible bifurcating choice that you possibly can, you're out at one of the leaf nodes. What that means is that you can then zero in on your leaf node. And that defines, like a little, for lack of a better word, kind of a micro tribe of perspective, right? We all share this particular perspective. Now, why might that be valuable? That might be valuable so that when we're having conversations of what we can actually do and what we should be focused on, if we're endlessly arguing back and forth, is Guy right, is Guy wrong? Like my conversation last night with my brilliant buddy, right? We're just keep going back and forth, and I'm just like, dude, wake up. And and then he just goes on and on and on. What a waste of time, right? Versus when we meet up with like-minded people, it can be a great accelerator because we don't spend our time arguing over such fundamental questions. We've kind of done our homework and gotten that all figured out. Now, of course, the flip side of that is that when you do find your micro tribe, I guess it's very easy to get into a form of groupthink. I'm going to go back to video just so we can kind of connect a bit here. But that's the flip side. Is all right. Now we're a bunch of people who all think the same way. But what's interesting is we don't have to just spend our time with people who think the same way. But it might be very refreshing from time to time to sort of touch base with people who actually think the same way along these fundamental questions. Like, I would love to meet up with a bunch of other people who, like me, believe that A, Guy is right, and B, Jamen is right, that there's something that we can do about it. And therefore, we can now really roll up our sleeves and get to the really interesting work that's awaiting us, that's awaiting people like Jamen, and say, okay, what do we do? Okay, great. We got to figure it. We got to, transform human culture as part of it. And we need to transform the economy, and we need to transform this and transform that, and then I can just be going off with other like-minded, who other people might see as these dorky goofballs, dorky, utopian Don Quixote goofballs who just don't quite get it. But, so be it, right? We'll be doing our thing. And then other people who've gone off on a whole different path down across the different bifurcating questions will, can hang out with their tribe. But then what we can also do is agree to meet up and actually have conversations about these bifurcating questions. We can have kind of representatives from both sides of a bifurcation meet in the middle. Those who believe that Guy is wrong and those who believe that Guy is right, including but not limited to Guy himself. And let's have an open conversation. Okay, what are the points upon which we agree, and what are the points upon which we disagree? Right? Etc. So I'm going to go on mute because I've spoken quite a bit here.
Well, so Jamen, I think that what you've sketched out is it's very helpful in terms of kind of conceptualizing how there can be so many different perspectives at work when approaching the same realities, and B, I think in terms of just of being able to follow one's own trajectory. But I think there are a couple things that I want to add here or challenge in some ways. One is a lot of what you were talking about was thinking. You think Guy's right. You think, that you can save the world, or you can, take on the economy or the ecology of the planet. And you think differently from somebody who, thinks Guy's wrong, for instance. I want to add that I think that a lot of it isn't mental. It isn't an intellectual process purely. There is certainly an intellectual aspect to it, but I think there's a great deal of people's thinking, if you will, about what's going on here and who's right and who's wrong, whether it's Guy or Jamen or whatever. That really is more about feeling, and very frequently unexamined feeling. And so that kind of complicates things in some ways, because we are not talking about something that can be diagrammed when we start talking, or that probably should be diagrammed, in my opinion, when we start talking about how people react, what they do when they're frightened or when they're uncomfortable. That's not something, for instance, no matter how much information you have, no matter how conclusive it is, you are not likely going to convince somebody who doesn't wish to be convinced, who doesn't have the emotional capacity to take in a particular reality. I mean, there are people who go to their executions thinking that at the next moment the Supreme Court is going to stay their execution, even though there's no evidence that that's going to happen, because that's how they need to function.
And that's documented. That's been like researched and whatnot. What you just mentioned.
I've certainly read it. Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Interesting. No, and go ahead. Yeah.
No, I guess the other thing that I just want to say is that well, I also agree with you that there's something rejuvenating and nurturing and nourishing about being able to connect with what you call a micro tribe, with people of like mind and heart in the face of something, really life altering. Really important to kind of touch into some kind of consensus experience and reality. I also feel like a lot of what we're looking at is because we've managed to isolate ourselves into little micro tribes and not feel into what someone else experiences. So anyway, I can see both the benefit and also the potential drawbacks of looking at those decision trees in that way.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. What you mentioned there, because it highlights for me that, I mean, I just kind of offer this as a tool. It's not something
Mhm.
that I say everyone needs to go and find your tribe and segregate yourselves. Nothing at all like of the sort.
No. Yeah.
It's a tool that people can use if they wish, and one of the benefits of using the tool is that you at least gain some consciousness and perspective of where you're coming from, and that you see that it is, very, very specific, and it's very, very different in many ways. And if you go to the polar opposite of the cube, right, which for me might be going, I don't know, somewhere to the deep south, to an extreme right wing Christian Tea Party, whatever, that believes climate change is a big hoax and that infinite growth is possible and whatever. Um, I might really learn some fascinating things by hanging out with that tribe. And to what extent do these different micro tribes open themselves up and are open to discussing and feeling into, like, if I go into that other micro tribe and really feel my way into it, I might say, wow, I'm right at home here. Guy is wrong, and climate change is a hoax, and whatever. I mean, and it's certainly possible. I don't expect that would happen, but anyway, there's so much benefit that can be, if to using it as a map, and as one way of looking, one very perhaps shallow way of looking at reality, and the different places people can go with all this information.
So I'm
Yeah.
going to jump in here and say something because I need to finish up shortly. But so here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that I agree with you. There's a lot of benefit to being able to see that there's no point in your haranguing your friend, because you're not going to, cross 40,000 branches to get to him. You've got to go back down to the beginning if you want to reach him in some way.
Exactly.
So yes, it's very helpful in that sense because we don't have time or energy to waste on stuff like this at this point in time. And what I want to suggest, and I have no idea what I'm talking about, so whatever. But what I want to suggest, Jamin, is that you and I have some fundamental bifurcations. We go in different directions at a certain point. We follow the same path and we take the same choices up to a point, and then we take some different ones, right?
Exactly.
And so what I want to suggest is that next time we hang out, that we, and I will work on how we can do this, that we work on a way. And I was inspired when you were talking about, going to the deep south. And it's like, so how not, can you, I mean, so what I'm thinking there is like, you walk into a situation where there's like radical difference from your perspective, right? And you are not, because you have a brain and because it's a good brain, you are not going to discard everything you know and believe, right? You're not going to say, oh, I see the light. It's all fine. I think I'll go home and drink a 6-pack and light a cigar. Um, so, but at the same time, is it not possible to make a deep and meaningful connection with people whose perspective is very, very different, simply for the reality of that connection? Not because it advances anything, not because it changes anything as an outcome, but because that connection is really what human beings can do at their greatest and their most expanded and their most beautiful. We can connect, um, and know others and love others, and we can love them and connect with them, even though we disagree with them on very important topics. So anyway, my suggestion to you is that somehow we can experiment with that.
Absolutely. That sounds like so much fun. Let's do it.
I
Yeah.
think so. I think so. And if there's somebody else who wants to join us next time who has a completely different appearance, who thinks that guy is wrong, then they should join us. Because I think that's part of the being, if you will, as opposed to the doing. And I think that the being is at least as important as the doing um, in this circumstance. We've seen doing lead us in all sorts of crazy decisions, I mean, directions. And so anyway, I'd just like to play with that a little bit. if you're open.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because, and I think that this will actually end up being a fundamental part of the transformation in human culture, is at some level acceptance, and at a deeper level being able to be with,
Mhm.
others, to
Mhm.
be with other members of other micro tribes, and to even have organized mixers where we get together with them, and maybe we discuss some completely orthogonal bifurcation where, you know, half of the deep south micro tribe is on one side and half is on the other, and half of this, you know, progressive northwest tribe is on one side and on the other, and we get together and we play a game of shirts and skins where, you know, you've got a total mix on the field between deep south and northwest. You got deep south and northwest playing on team A, and deep south and northwest mixing it up and playing on team B, and they're finding that, wait a second, we don't have to divide along this traditional line, we can divide along some other line.
Exactly.
And then I'm laughing at the whole idea of dividing along any line, right? And then we can have other mixers where we just get together and, I don't know, you know, play cards or something, or just tell stories, or read, you know, or whatever, read stories from childhood. I don't care. I'm just saying there's so many ways that we can come together, so many ways that we can work together, and so many ways that we can have discourse and dialogue that is respectful and indeed fun. Look at what we're doing here, you and I, Elizabeth. We're kind of modeling that.
Exactly.
We're the Adam and Eve of this new, of this transformation in human culture.
God forbid.
I'll show up with a leaf next time. All right.
Instead of a beard.
Either that or a really long beard, one or the other.
So, Jamin, I actually have to stop now.
Sure.
But I don't know if you want to keep talking and keep recording, or do you want to be done for today?
Yeah. Let's be compassionate towards our audience and be done for the day.
All right.
We'll pick it up next time.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank
Cool.
you so much.
Yeah.
All right,
Thank
see
you.
next time.
Okay.